Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inna alhamdulillahi nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lah wa man yudlil fala hadiya lah. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu amma ba'd. فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله تعالى وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. My dear brothers and sisters, today is the day of the 29th of Dhul Qa'dah, 1444 years after the Hijrah, or the migration of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which coincides with June 18th, 2023. I welcome you back to our Hajj presentation, and since we are covering the topic of the Musafir or a traveler and how he prays the Qasr, today we are going to discuss three scenarios or three questions with regards to Salat al-Qasr for the Musafir. The first question, and that's more pertaining to the travel that many of our brothers and sisters are already in or going. I'm traveling in Hajj. I will first travel to my home country and stay there with my relatives for few days, and then we'll go for Hajj. Someone told me if someone goes back to his home country or he goes to a land where he has a house or a land, he cannot pray Qasr there. Is this true? And if this is true, what should I do? When can I or should I pray or stop praying Qasr, etc., etc.? So the first question is it true that when I go and visit my home country or my motherland, I cannot pray Qasr there? Is it true? No, it's not true. Because the Prophet ﷺ, as you remember the hadith of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he said, I was born in Makkah and I made hijrah to Al-Madinah, but when I go back to Makkah, I pray Qasr. As-Sahabat al-Kiram, many of their birthplace was Makkah, and they never said, I'm coming back to my birthplace so I cannot pray Qasr. In fact, they prayed Qasr. The Prophet ﷺ stayed in Makkah, as a hadith of Ibn Abbas in Bukhari, for 19 days during the travel, and he prayed Qasr. So this opinion or this statement is incorrect. Second, is it true that if I go to a place and in that place or in that town I own a land, piece of land, or a piece of property or a house, that I cannot pray Qasr there? There is nothing like this. This opinion or this statement is also false, because as Sahabat al-Kiram used to have properties in Makkah because they were originally from Makkah, and some of them, although they migrated to Al-Madinah, they still owned that property and they had their non-Muslim relatives taking care of that, and these are very famous narrations, authentic narrations to prove that point. So, and they never considered themselves as, when they go back, that they cannot pray Qasr. They prayed Qasr when they went back to their home country. So now I'm traveling to Hajj, let's say from Austin to Pakistan, and I'm going to stay there for 2 weeks. The time the Qasr becomes obligatory is when I leave the boundary of Austin. We have discussed it if you go back to the class before, trying to understand the concept of traveling. Once you cross the boundary of Austin, your Qasr becomes obligatory. You cannot pray the full prayer anymore unless you're praying behind a person who is praying 4, like a resident person. If he is praying 4, then you have to pray 4. Otherwise, you pray 2. Or if you lead the prayer and there are residents praying behind you, still pray 2. And after the 2 rakat, you tell them, I'm a traveler, so complete your prayer, as the Prophet used to do. Anyway, the moment we cross the boundary of Austin, the Qasr becomes obligatory. I go to Pakistan, it's my homeland, let's say. Still, I keep on praying Qasr because I'm a Musafir there. It doesn't matter how many lands I have there, how many relatives I have there. I was born and brought up there, doesn't matter. I keep on praying Qasr in Pakistan for 2-3 weeks, whatever. And from there I go to perform Hajj. I keep on praying the Qasr. And when I go for Hajj, of course, again, you're praying in Masjidul Haram, you're praying behind the Imam. He's going to pray 4, so you should pray 4. That's not to be disputed about. And the moment, the time that Qasr becomes, you should stop praying the Qasr is when you enter, come back inshallah safely and enter the city limit of Austin. This whole trip, even if it takes you a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, unlimited amount of time, do not listen to these people who will tell you 4 days, 10 days, 18 days, 19 days. These opinions are just opinions. They do not have any solid foundation from the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if you listen to our class before, you will know that so many of the Sahabat al-Kiram and the Tabi'een, their position was that it is unlimited, and this is the correct position. Anyway, so this is the Hadi would be for the Hajji, those who are living their hometown and going to their motherland, let's say, in the example I gave you, and then they went to perform their Hajj and come back to their hometown. The second question, and this is a very common scenario in many places that we live in. My parents travel between Bangladesh and Austin. They live in Bangladesh and they come to stay in Austin for few months, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months. They are asking how and when they can pray Qasr. So now they live in Bangladesh, so we would assume that they would consider Bangladesh is their hometown, meaning like they will consider as resident when they are in Bangladesh. Okay, so if they consider themselves to be resident of Bangladesh, then the moment they leave the town in Bangladesh, let's say they live in Dhaka, the moment they leave the boundary of Dhaka, it is at this time the Qasr becomes obligatory. Okay, so now they come to Austin, they will keep on praying Qasr. When they live in Austin with their children or siblings or relatives for X number of months or X number of whatever time, this amount of time we ask them, do you consider yourself to be a traveler or do you consider yourself to be a resident? Okay, in the same scenario, some parents might consider, it doesn't matter, I consider myself as a traveler because I don't live here, I'm here to just visit my children and my relatives in Austin or wherever, wherever they are going, whichever country they are going. So in this scenario, they will keep on praying Qasr during this period of time, of months or whatever. They will stay in the Austin or whichever city they live with their relatives or their children, and they will keep on praying Qasr when they are going back to Bangladesh until they enter the city limit of Dhaka. This is when their Qasr will finish. However, if some parents they say that I am going to my son's house or my daughter's house and that's my house, I feel that this is my house and I feel exactly like I'm in Bangladesh. Okay, in this case we cannot force him to be a traveler. The same way we cannot force somebody to say no, you are not a traveler. The same way we cannot force somebody to say okay, you should be a traveler or you should not be a traveler. So if this is what they sincerely think, that not because of the time limit, oh I'm staying more than 14 days, I heard after 19 days I cannot be Muslim. No, not because of those reasons, but because naturally you feel that you are, when you are in Austin, you feel that you are in one of your resident town, in this case. When they leave Dhaka, the boundary of Dhaka, Qasr becomes obligatory, and when they enter the boundary of Austin, they have to stop paying Qasr. The only time they pay Qasr is between the travel. So the first scenario was the parents, they considered their stay in the town of their children, wherever their children are staying. They don't consider themselves to be a resident. They consider themselves to be a traveler, regardless of how many weeks or months they live there. Okay, that's fine. So they will pray Qasr all the way from leaving the boundary of their town, hometown, and until they come back to the boundary of their hometown. In the second scenario, a group of parents in the same setting, they are from Bangladesh, they come to Austin, they live for 6-7 months in Austin. What they should do? Well, these parents, they are saying, no, when I come to Austin, I feel like I'm exactly in my resident town. I feel like I'm a resident here. Yeah, but you do not own the passport of this country. You know that you're visiting the house of your child. Okay. He says, yes, I know everything. You don't have to be you don't have to own a passport to consider yourself to be a resident of a place. I feel like I'm a resident. You don't have to have a passport for that. You can feel I'm a resident. That's it. So in this scenario, they will only pray the Qasr, or they must pray the Qasr from the time they leave the boundary of the Dhaka, which is their hometown, and they enter the boundary of Austin, which is another of their hometown that they're claiming now. So as you can see, that it also depends on the person's situation. Okay, in the same scenario, a group of parents thinks they are traveler. In the another group of parents in the same scenario thinks that I'm not a traveler. We cannot force either way, and we cannot impose on them some condition that is not in the Quran and the Sunnah. If they feel like this sincerely, then they are traveler. If they don't feel like that, then they are resident. And depending on what they feel is the hukum or the ruling will change, as you can see, inshallah. The next question is also very important and a very practical scenario among many of the brothers who live in one place with their family, but they have to go to another town far away to work and to stay there for a period of time. So these three questions, when we study this, I think it will kind of cover all sorts of scenario, inshallah ta'ala. If you understand the concept of traveling, and we understand that sometimes you have to see what you feel in that specific town. You are the one at the end of the day will decide, am I travel or not? Then based upon that, the rulings will kind of change from one person to another. The rulings are same. The Kitab and the Sunnah, the rulings are same. But how it will be applied will be a little bit different based upon how the person feels, whether he's a traveler or not. Okay, this question is very important. He says, I travel between two cities, Austin and New York. I live in Austin with my family and my work is in New York. What should I do? Can I pray Qasr in New York? I live in Austin for 2 months and I live in New York for 8 months. So it could be more or less here and there, but let's stick to this scenario. So, can I consider Austin to be my hometown, although I stay there only for 2 months? So it is not because you are staying in Austin for 2 months that you have to consider this as a place of travel. Neither it is that because you are staying in New York for 8 months that you have to force yourself to think that you are a resident there. These things don't decide whether you are a resident or traveler. You will decide that. You will decide that. So, can I consider Austin to be my hometown, although I stay there only for 2 months? Yes, you can. Yes, you can if you want to. Because this is my hometown, this is where my children live, this is where my spouse lives, my parents live, this is where I come back, this is where I exactly feel like I am in my hometown. Okay. But I live here only for 2 months, doesn't matter. Even if you live here for 2 days. Even if you live here for 2 days, you are a resident here. Okay. Then the next question comes is, okay. Do I have to consider New York to be my hometown since I'm staying there for 8 months? No, you don't have to. You don't have to consider New York to be your hometown even if you are there 360 days of the year and only 5 days you're in Austin. There is nothing like this which forces you to become a resident or a traveler. That's why we wanted to discuss this thing, so that this concept from the mind is gone. You will decide. In your scenario, you will decide whether you are a traveler, where you are a traveler. As long as you understand what is traveling, alhamdulillah, you will decide that. Yeah, there are some ground rules we have already set, that I am going from Austin to Buda, for example. I gave you the example in the first class. Can I consider myself to be a traveler? No, you can't. Because you are going from your hometown to your neighboring town. We discussed all of these things. So there are some ground rules that defines who can be a traveler, who cannot be a traveler. But at the end of the day, when you are in the safar, at a certain location, you will decide whether you are in the state of traveling or not. Okay. Scenario 1. Austin, a person lives in Austin 2 months. Let's say we have 3 people like this. All 3 of them live in Austin with their family for 2 months during the year and 8 months in total during the year in New York. 3 different people. Okay? And 3 different people could have 3 different conclusions. The first person says, Austin and New York, whenever I'm in both of these towns, I feel I'm a resident. What is his argument? His argument is, although I know that they are far away, but both I feel, because this is where I work and this is where my family is. So when I enter Austin, I'm in my hometown. And when I'm entering New York, I'm in my hometown. Okay, so you can have 2 hometowns, no problem. Actually, you can have more than 2. You can have multiple hometowns. Each of those towns you enter, you feel like I'm a resident. Oh, fine. Not forced, that you sincerely believe that you're a resident. This person who considers Austin and New York both to be his resident, he will only pray Qasr when he leaves the boundary of Austin and enters the boundary of New York. Between these 2 cities, okay, this is the time Qasr becomes obligatory for him. And he will stop praying Qasr once he enters the boundary of one of these towns. This is scenario 1. In the same scenario, the second person says, Austin is my hometown. I live here only for 2 months, doesn't matter. But this is where my family is, my this, my that, all this. He feels, this is not because of this reason the Sharia obligates him. No. This is because he feels that. He feels that, okay? But then what about New York? He says, no, I don't feel that this is my hometown. I go there to work and I feel I'm a traveler. Okay? So in this case, when he leaves Austin, the boundary of Austin, and is this fine? Yes, this is absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. So when he leaves the boundary of Austin, Qasr becomes obligatory to him. And all the way he is in New York, he stays there for several months. Let's say he was there 1 month in Austin. Then he goes back to New York. He usually stays there for 4 months. Then he goes back to visit. But now he stayed 6 months. It doesn't matter. Until he comes back to Austin, the boundary of Austin, he will keep on praying Qasr. He must pray Qasr. Why? Because he considers himself to be a traveler in New York. Okay. Now, the third scenario. The person says, Austin, although this is my family, although this is where I originally live, but now, because of this scenario that I live in, 2 months over there, 8 months here, I don't consider Austin anymore my hometown. When I go to New York, I feel like this is my hometown. And when I come to Austin, although it's my family, my children, my everything, but I feel I'm a traveler. Okay, this is also fine. This is also fine. So for this person, what happens? When he leaves the boundary of New York, the Qasr becomes obligatory for him until he enters back to the boundary of New York. So the amount of time he spends in Austin, in his own house, with his own family, with his children, whatever, all of these times he will pray Qasr. He must pray Qasr. Why? Because he considers himself to be a traveler when he is in Austin. If you understand these 3 questions, you will understand the dynamics of these challenging things that, and practical things that people will face all the time. And in some cases, as you know, you need to know the ground rules of what is safar, what is not safar. And then you need to know these rules which kind of are flexible. And you will fit yourself in. And you should not be forced to believe that you are a traveler. And then it should be forced. For example, this person who lives in New York for 8 months, somebody cannot come and say, oh, you live there for more than 19 days, you cannot pray Qasr. Cannot be forced. Somebody cannot force him to think that he is not a traveler there because he works there. The third scenario, the person considers Austin to be he considers himself to be a traveler in Austin. Okay. So somebody cannot say, no, you cannot be a traveler in Austin. Why you cannot be a traveler in Austin? Because you have your hometown here, your children are here. How can you consider yourself to be a traveler? We tell them, who are you to force him to be a traveler or not to be a traveler? He has the option here. So we have to know that there are some ground set rules that cannot be changed. when it comes to the rules of traveling, and who is a musafir and who is not a musafir. And there are some scenarios which gives them the flexibility. And based upon those flexibility, you will know when to obligate your qasr timing, meaning the clock ticks and its obligation, and when it stops. And the last question I think is very beautiful because it kind of gives you the different dynamics and the scenario of in the same scenario, the three people can have three different conclusion. Okay, and all these conclusions, inshallah, are valid, are supported by the Sharia. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us sincere. What we should not do is to say that, let me consider both of the place to be a traveler because then I can pray qasr in both places. This is not we should do. We should not try to play tricks in the religion. We should try to sincerely know what is the definition of musafir, what is safar, and then alhamdulillah you will know. We are very matured people, inshallah. When we fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't have to fear anything else. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.